Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffman coming back at you again for part 2 of taking a look at taxation without representation, which is APUSH topic 3.3. Last time we were together, we were talking about how some policies such as the Sugar Act and probably most infamously the Quartering Acts and Stamp Acts were all designed as ways to try to save money, raise revenue, if you will, for the British Crown after the French-Indian War to try to alleviate some of those debts. And as we mentioned, those policies didn't go over so well with the colonists. They believed that it was a violation of their rights to impose taxation policies without their representation, without their consent. Remember, it's a principled matter, not a money matter at the end of the day. And the reaction was pretty swift and severe. You know, aside from some roughnecks from the Sons of Liberty actually, roughing up tax collectors, there was also a growing sense of unity amongst numerous colonies, or at least communities, to share these same grievances and be able to try to coordinate things like a boycott and promote homespun goods to try to prevent Britain from, in essence, capitalizing or profiting off of these policies. Now, we mentioned that the Stamp Act was so unpopular that Parliament repealed the law, but did assert through the Declaratory Act that they did have the right to issue additional policies. And they will. Not too long afterwards, we will see the Townshend Acts be created. And this is going to be a tax on a broader area of items. It wasn't just written, legal documents like the Stamp Act. You're talking about things beyond just paper products. You're talking about a tax on lead, paint, pitch. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, but probably most infamously, tea, a common popular drink. As popular as coffee is today in this country, back then it was tea. So imagine today a tax placed on coffee without our consent, and that's going to explain a little bit why folks are going to be upset. But there's going to be more to it than just having a broader set of taxes on a number of consumer goods. It's also going to be the reality of how other rights are going to seemingly be able to be violated. And that's going to be including the use of writs of assistance. A writ of assistance is a general search of somebody as opposed to a specific thing. So, if you are, just some person named John Smith, the government can issue a search of you, John Smith, and anything and everything that is associated with you, from your legal papers to the a chest that you may have in your home to the pockets on your clothes. That is a general search, and it's done without a warrant. It's done without any kind of probable cause, without any kind of reasonable suspicion that a judge would have to sign off on. It was just a legal act passed by government to be able to do such things. Once again, this is seen as a clear invasion of our privacy, an invasion of our rights, and hopefully you are picking up on the notion that this is going to be a portion of how we're going to react in creating the Bill of Rights. This is going to lead to eventually the Fourth Amendment, which protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. In addition, defiance is going to be continuing with regards to some of these policies, including the hated Quartering Act. In New York, Parliament is going to be so mad with what New York was doing in basically just a general refusal of following the policies of the Quartering Act that we're actually going to see Parliament shut down the New York legislature, dissolve it. And note, once again, think about how this would be perceived as a violation of rights. The colonies had, for generations now, had a tradition of having self-government, at least on a local level. And now Parliament, kind of like that intruding parent coming out of the clear blue sky, is now coming in and basically shutting that down, saying that, no, you really don't have that authority. We in Parliament have the final say on everything that goes on. And so once again, it seems like Parliament is flexing its muscles in a way that, from a colonial perspective, doesn't need to be done. That Parliament doesn't need to be tyrannical like this. All Parliament really needs to do is include the colonies in this process. And in many respects, this is going to be the basis of John Dickinson's Letter from a Pennsylvania Farmer. Dickinson was not some rabid revolutionary. He's not going to be somebody like a Patrick Henry, for example, or a Thomas Paine or anything like that. Dickinson was somebody that, really all the way up to the Revolution, viewed himself as a loyal Englishman. But he was also, once again, a child of the Enlightenment, a child of this idea of natural rights, and for him it was just very reasonable. Taxation in and of itself is not a sin. It is not an example of tyranny. Taxation must be done to have a functioning government, but the folks that are being taxed must be the ones that have the decision-making process. And for him, it was just simple. If you want to tax the colonies, fine, but just include the colonies in that decision-making process. The colonies don't want to be viewed as different. The colonies don't want to be viewed as something less than. In many respects, Dixon's talking about that the colonies want Parliament's love. They want Parliament's, acceptance and be brought into the fold. They want that representation in Parliament. But unfortunately, Parliament will not listen. London does not clearly view the colonies as the same as counties in England, and that's becoming more and more apparent. And that, of course, leads to revolution. It's one of the many steps towards revolution that, if our desire to be viewed as equals in Parliament is absolutely being rejected, then are we really equal? Are we really, the same as any other Englishman? Clearly not, because we're being ignored. We're being, told that, no, we are not going to be included. Even when Sam Adams is going to be authoring a letter made up of the voices of numerous important Massachusetts colonial leaders to try to, get Parliament to listen, to, get Parliament to repeal these hated Townshend Acts, Parliament will not respond favorably. They will ignore these pleas. They will assert their ability to add these laws. And in fact, in response to growing attempts at boycotts and smuggling to try to get around these Townshend Acts, Britain is going to do the opposite of saying, oh, okay, we're going to listen, we're going to bring you into the fold, and we'll let you have a say, I'll let you have a seat at the table, if you will. They do the exact opposite. They decide that they're going to, respond with a hammer. And that hammer is going to come in the form of thousands of British regulars that are going to be sent over. The Redcoats are now going to be coming over en masse to enforce these laws. And remember, these were folks that were, allies of ours in the French and Indian War. We had fought alongside them, but we had learned something very important socially in that experience, that the British soldiers looked down on us. They did not view us as equals. They viewed us as our frontier country bumpkin cousins at best that were not really true, proper Englishmen, and therefore shouldn't be viewed as such. And now these same guys that were our allies fighting the French and the natives are now going to be start to seen as our oppressors, as the ones that are enforcing these these tyrannical policies against us. So, be mindful that, what the redcoat is going to mean, what the British regular soldier is going to mean to us as we go through the late 1760s and into the early 1770s. Now, what had been a grand experiment to try to raise more revenue and on a broad set of products is like the Stamp Act, although it's going to take a much longer for Parliament to figure this out, or at least they're going to give the Townshend Act more time to try to become profitable. It's not going to work. The boycotts are working. Smuggling is working. The sending of redcoats is still not changing the reality that Britain, at the end of the day, the whole reason they're doing this is to make money, and they're not making money. And at the same time, what they're doing is ticking off the locals. From Britain's perspective, they just want the money. They just want to be able to pay off these debts, and it seems like no matter what they're doing, it's not working. So from a British perspective, from Parliament's perspective, it just means, well, we just got to ratchet it up to the next level. We cannot let these colonists dictate what we do. We are the mother country, and if these policies don't work, then we got to ratchet it up to the next level. We have to make it more severe. In other words, punishments getting more severe, responses getting more severe, policies that are more severe, and that, of course, only raises the temperature. All that does is just make relations between us and Parliament even worse. And so by the time we get to 1770, to be a person that was a British regular, to be someone that seemed to be what they are now calling a loyalist, someone that was supportive of the crown and was not part of the protesting and resistance to these policies, it's going to lead to a lot of tension between these forces, those that call themselves patriots and those that are considered loyalists. And we get into this kind of environment by the end of the 1760s, where there was just a lot of grumbling and name calling and minor acts of violence and attempts at intimidation, and it just really was not healthy. It was pretty toxic. And then that brings us to the infamous March 5th, 1770 incident that is going to be taking place in Boston. And on this occasion, once again, in this environment of, there had been this history of, names called, rocks thrown, attempts at intimidating businesses that were loyal and complying with British policies. We saw British redcoats, trying to intimidate colonists that were patriots. So you had this milieu that was going on. Well, on this snowy day, we saw a British redcoat soldier that was outside of the local customs house in Boston, and he was becoming harassed and intimidated by a group of local colonists, patriots, if you will. He gets nervous, he gets scared, especially once he's being threatened with violence. Some rocks are being thrown at him. He calls in for reinforcements, so we see a number of British redcoat soldiers be brought in to kind of help him out. Well, now this is seen as the soldiers are arming up to try to attack the colonists, so these patriots feel like their lives are now in jeopardy, so they ring the bell, and that brings more colonists down out of a sense of, be prepared to fight, yada yada. This leads to some of the soldiers kind of swinging their bayonets at the colonists to try to fend them off. We see some bottles be thrown, some ice balls be thrown, rocks, and things are reaching a fever pitch. And still to this day, we don't have a definitive answer as to who yelled it out, but according to witnesses, somebody yells out fire from somewhere, and the redcoats fire on the colonists. They fire on the patriots, and this is going to be a bloody mess. As you can see depicted here by Paul Revere, you can see that these soldiers are firing on unarmed colonists, and in the result, 5 are going to be killed. Now note, this is going to be a very sad and tragic, violent result. People were killed. That's never a good thing. But the way that Massachusetts colonists are going to view this, and especially the way that Paul Revere is going to be promoting this through this lithograph right here, as you can see, is that this is going to start to be described not as the Boston misunderstanding or the Boston tragedy even. This is going to be the Boston massacre. Massacre. A massacre implying that this was massive and the victims were innocent, which is really the sentiment that these colonial leaders had, that this is just the next level of tyranny that Britain has now imposed on us. They are willing to not just tax us without permission. They are not just willing to violate our economic rights or some of our political rights. They are willing to take away our ultimate right, our right to live. And something must be done about it. What this does is engage even more local colonists to try to join the resistance movement. And all it does is ratchet up the temperature in this growing, getting hot cauldron of tension between Parliament and its American colonies. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to leave it there for today. We'll have part 3. We'll take up next time. We'll talk about the early 1770s in terms of British policies and colonial responses. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.